series which deals with diversity and inclusion with a specific focus on Asian American and Pacific Islanders, but really includes everybody because we all have our own stories and we all have things that we are conflicted about and things that we like to chat about. And today we are going to talk about the phenomenon that was K-pop the musical. So, first up, I'm just going to go, I'm not picking favorites, although one person here has done so many panels for me, and she clearly is one of my favorites. This is the first Asian woman to be Tony nominated for Best Composer in Helen Park. Next up is Eddy, who played Sky in K-pop. Then we have Marina Kondo, who was the, we have Amy. Sorry, you switched. I was like, then we have Amy Keum, who played Ivy in Artemis, right? I saw the show twice, by the way. And I was there on closing, so we're going to talk about that. And about my long, extended hug with Zach Kaiser, who was devastated. And then we have Marina Kondo, who was a swing and covered all the female roles. And also was the dance captain. Yes, you were the dance captain?
The dance captain. Sorry. I have to use a mic.
Yeah, you have to use a mic.
Assistant dance captain.
Projecting is not going to work because we have 1,700 seats. And then finally, we have Abraham Lim, who played Jay in Fate. So now, I titled this panel, This Is Our Storia, because that is one of the lyrics from the show, but also because I just want to give everybody who doesn't know a little bit of background. So K-pop started off Broadway very successfully in 2017 at Ars Nova and had a wonderful run and was extended and all these kinds of things. And then the Broadway company opened in 2022 at Circle Inn Square, right? It ran for 44 previews and 17 performances. And I know, keep that energy. We're gonna get to it. And out of that run, it was a small run, but we had 3 Tony nominations, one for costume design, one for choreography, and one for score. And as I mentioned, Helen is the first Asian woman to be nominated in the composition category and is now a Tony voter, yes? You just pick it up.
Tony nominator.
Tony nominator, right. I knew it was somewhere in there. And I wanted to discuss a couple of things because it seemed to me, I held my tongue and my blog a little bit. I supported the show and I said, but I wasn't reporting on what people were writing about it, right? I kept saying, okay, this show is coming, please go support it, all those kinds of things. But I personally was like, I don't know what my place here is to comment on what people are saying about a Broadway musical. It's a Broadway musical, it's for everybody, so it's fair game, yes? However, when I started reading the reviews, I couldn't help but notice that there was a particular, can we keep it down back there, sorry? That there was a particular, I hate to use the word, there were microaggressions in all the reviews. And I think that's the kindest way to say that, right? That there were microaggressions. And so that's kind of what I responded to in terms of how could you honestly write these things in this day and age about performers who happen to have different backgrounds than what we normally see on Broadway, but who are performers. So Broadway is a primarily white institution, and I don't think I'm saying anything that anybody hasn't thought over time. But what did it feel like when you read those reviews and you had to really digest them, and not just digest them personally, but digest them for the world, because you are the first Korean pop-based musical to hit our stages, and they took shots at you like I couldn't believe. Anybody.
Hi everyone. What's up, BroadwayCon? You know, I remember on opening night, because I'm psychotic enough to do something like this, I remember being at the opening night celebration and kind of like starting to read the reviews. And the truth is, as artists, as storytellers, you're opening yourself up in a very vulnerable way that welcomes criticism. You know, whether you like it or not, it's going to come your way. And I think when the criticism is based and lies on a foundation of the art, of the story that's being told, then that's fine, you know, whether I agree with it or not, it exists, and that's what's going to come with it, and that's all fair game. But I think when you start taking, you know, like you said, there are certain microaggressions, if you want to call it that. I think some were more than that. And
some of them were macroaggressions. We all know who we're talking about. But I'm not going to give that reviewer air by mentioning their name. Because I think that's one of the ways to take away their power. Just don't mention their name. But we know what he wrote.
Right. And I think that, you know, when we almost feel like we're not being welcomed to the table based on, you know, the language that we use in our show, which is only used for about like 25 to 30% of the show, and the rest is in English, and the songs are like half of it are in Korean. You know, you start to feel a little bit like, okay, but what about the shows that are in Italian that you've seen, or you know, these other shows that are closer to the proximity of whiteness? You know, is it that? And you can't help but think of like the actual term for Broadway, which is the Great White Way. And it's like, wow, do I just not fit? And I'm fighting so hard to fit in here for the people that I'm representing and for the story that is rooted so deeply in me. But is that fight even worth it if this is what's going to come with it, right?
I totally understand that.
I think that was heartbreaking.
And also, just to put it in perspective, Light in the Piazza had a lot of Italian in it. Now, in college, I happened to study Italian, so it didn't bother me at all, but I did notice people shifting a little bit because there was so much Italian, but I was like, yes, because they are Italians, and the part that we are, this is like a window in, so you can still tell, yes, it's a father and a son and they're having an argument. Do I need to know exactly? Isn't every argument kind of self-explanatory, you know, when there's an age difference? Because you see him freak out that she's 26 and his son is 19. And I didn't need to be completely fluent in Italian to understand that. And also, I mean, I will just preface here, my husband is Korean, so I have heard a lot of Korean. 안녕하세요. I know how to order drinks, and I know how to curse, so that's not appropriate. Because all his friends thought that was really funny to teach me. So because that is a Romance language, nobody pointed out how difficult it was to understand, and yet with the Korean, and there was a comment on it in the book, and the people, you all just went, well, just learn Korean, which, fair point. How devastating was that for you? Well, I don't know it is devastating to know that your language is viewed with so much derision by our white press. Helen, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like a lot of the reviews were actually very positive. Like, and you know, nobody really like pointed out that language bothers them, except for that one review. I think that got a lot of attention. But honestly, I think there is progress being made, and people being amazed by the power of music that actually transcends the barrier of language. And I think that is the whole point of K-pop. The genre, it is worldwide. It's a worldwide phenomenon that people love, and they don't even understand how. They don't speak Korean, but like people in the Middle East, people in Africa, in Europe, they all love K-pop. And I think our show was attempting to sort of examine why that is, you know. And so in terms of the score, I was fully aware that not a lot of people speak Korean, and it was very it was a lot of thought were put into where we place the Korean and what other aspects of the story or the design is actually communicating, and also choreo. Choreo's power in K-pop is like, it is another art. It's another form of storytelling. And so the essence of the show and the storytelling of the show really did not rely on lyrics, and that was not the point at all. And I think some reviewers or some audience even might not quite get that attempt at this new form of storytelling, but I think it was very successful to the majority of the audiences and a lot of the reviewers as well.
And if I may say, I think I agree with Helen. So many of the reviews were positive, and I'm so glad that it resonated with with the audiences and the reviewers. But ultimately, I think the power in the show lies in the fact that we're not just about Korean barbecue or karaoke or kimchi.
Isn't it norebang?
And yeah, norebang. But we're telling our story on our terms. And it's not up to you to fetishize or highlight certain aspects of our culture that you feel comfortable enough with. This is our stage. And regardless of whether or not this language is something that you're familiar with, that's not on you. This is up to us, right? And I think therein lies the power of the show, and that's what K-pop was ultimately about. So, how about that?
Yeah, I think that's well said. Amy, how did you feel being a member of Artemis? Now, Artemis had a lot to live up to because, we have so many K-pop female groups, and we had many, many K-pop stars in the show. How did you feel you guys did? I thought you did great. I mean, I'll just preface that, but what was for you the pressure of being part of Artemis and having to gel that group together when all of you basically auditioned, right? You just auditioned and were put together, so not unlike K-pop groups, but it's different because it's Broadway, so it's three-dimensional to all of us.
I mean, in terms of the group that we had, I think it was surprising how quickly we became the force that we did. I don't think there was that much of an adjustment period, honestly, and especially considering Min and Bohyung and Kevin as well, the real K-pop artists that we had in our show. Any kind of oh, that's Min, and the intimidation immediately dissipated as soon as you meet Min or Kevin or Bohyung. They are nothing but humble and wanting to dig into the work, and so yeah, it didn't feel like they ever held any kind. There were never any kind of different levels in that way. I think we really came together. But yeah, it was a challenge. I think even as our show was developing, I think Artemis' story was the one that probably took the longest to find its groove, because on one hand, we want to address the things that women deal with. Oh my gosh, yes, women tend to put more pressure on themselves. Women tend to, aim for perfection. But we also didn't want to just hold up another story that, it has been told so many times of the women that are scared and so it was that balance of
Oh no, eating disorder. I'm not making fun of eating disorders. But yeah, there's a lot of tropes that are truths that happen in these situations, and a lot. The earlier version dealt with a lot more of that kind of stuff.
Right, and of course, whether or not that went into the show, it didn't end up being a major part of the narrative. But I think part of the reason why Jason didn't want to make it such a main vein is because I think it's easy when we think of K-pop, that's what the news lines are about. It's K-pop artists and their eating disorders. And I think Jason wanted to open up the opportunity for us to just be people. I mean, even during our first the last winter workshop that we had before our Broadway run, there was one day where we just decided, well, not we, Jason and Teddy were let's just sit down and let's record each of your stories. And that's a moment I have imprinted so vividly in my mind, is just sitting back and listening to each of our so vastly different and such heartfelt, pain-filled stories of how did I get here? why against all odds? Like, why would I choose to do this? And yeah, it kind of turned into like us crying and a little like a circle time story. But a lot of those tidbits ended up being what stayed in our story because it was true. And because ultimately we wanted Artemis not only to be like girl power and also, you know, telling the K-pop story, but it really was our story. We wanted to be people. So I think it felt really empowering.
Great. Eddie, you are not Korean, which I just found out.
I've been outed, no.
Yeah, boom, there you go. How did it feel? Now, I have I'm clearly mixed race. My experience has always been I'm either too Asian or not Asian enough. Within like the Asian diaspora, there's a lot of discussion about like, can we play other people's culture, other people's roles? Did you feel welcome playing your role in K-pop?
I do. I have to say that everyone in the cast, creatives, everything were so welcoming to it. I actually feel like I had more of an internal struggle of it because I was there being like, I'm not Korean. This isn't really my story. But you found me when I was like fresh into New York at like 2014 in the first auditions, and I remember like I'm like a hip hop dancer, was going into theater, kind of moved from Michigan like last minute in a way, and like found this. So I was like attached to it from a different angle, not from the cultural angle, and I felt it was tough. I was like, should I be taking up space here? Is there someone else that's more connected, could give more of a voice? Like, I think I was fighting through that like every day in a way, but everyone made me feel so welcome. So yeah.
I think it's an interesting conversation because like basically the primarily white institution that is Broadway, they're not going to know, right? They're not going to know. Who's going to know? Nobody's going to know, right? So it's our internal struggle as Asian Americans, as Asian people. It's our internal struggle to either embrace the talent that is before us and the person having the chops to do the role and being the best person for the role, or to say like, oh no, here's the line and we're drawing it ethnically, which is always such a hard thing for me to comprehend because I am mixed race and I'm cross-cultural. I'm actually Australian, which a lot of people don't know, but I'm Australian Chinese. My family's been in Australia since the 1800s. So it's very different for me to see all these people, you know, pattering on about like, well, that's a line and that's a, you know, I'm like, everybody borrows from everybody, right? And that's how I think you create the best art, is that you get input from various things.
Yeah, I think also like it's definitely case-to-case basis. More and more I feel like Broadway's getting so aware of all these different stories that we're telling, and I think specifically K-pop, like in reality our K-pop industry, it invites so many other groups of Asians. So in this world and in this specific story, I think it was valid, but I also had like, I'm Japanese, 100% Japanese, and I also shared the same struggles with Eddy, and I definitely thought every day on like what my role was in this specific show, but getting to learn about this industry, the people that are in it, and constant affirmations from everyone else was, I mean, we have such a great group of people.
And these two would never say it about themselves, so I'm just gonna say it. That question is an entirely separate conversation that could go on for hours.
Right.
So I'll just say, like, let's learn to walk before we run, and until there's ample enough Asian representation, let's walk. But I will say that with regards to Marina, who is Japanese, and Eddy and our other non-Korean folks in our cast, like, I think it's ultimately about honoring the story and honoring the heart of the story that's being told. And these two did it in a way that I would probably have gone nuts and just wreaked havoc on everyone. But they did it with so much grace and humility and talent and heart, and I was just so like inspired. And I'm Korean, you know, like I'm from Queens. But like, but yeah, no, they are incredible. So let's all give a round of applause for our two dance captains because they were fantastic.
I saw the the show twice. Every single person in that cast was really incredible. And as an audience member, and somebody who slightly has a foot in the water, I was not concerned whether or not everybody was exactly Korean or their DNA matched or anything else, because they were giving show, you know, in the same way that every Broadway professional gets up and gives show. It's 8 shows a week. I saw it the night everybody was sick and every single understudy was on. That was the first show I saw. And I was like, why are we late? And then I heard later, every single understudy is on. I went, oh, honestly, if it hadn't been for the time delay, I would not have known. Because everybody full out, nobody missed a step.
Because their swings and understudies kick.
Because your understudies kicked out.
They're amazing. They're...
Helen, do you have anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, the cast and the amount of work. Yeah.
It's hard.
Every single person had to kind of overcome fears, challenges. There are a lot of Koreans who flew all the way from Korea, away from their home, to be Broadway stars, and they just memorize English lines, and it's an original musical, right? So like every single day there's different lines, and they just memorize, and then digest it and try to make it their own language. And Marina and Eddy were some of the people who were just learning Korean silently, because they didn't want to be like such a burden to other Koreans and teaching them how to speak Korean or learn the culture. They did it silently on their own, and it was just such a great team of people who were just helping each other, being there for each other, overcoming these fears and challenges. It was just the most beautiful multicultural group of people that are still such good friends, and it's like a family. So I, as a creative, could not be more grateful, and also feel I just feel like I love them so much.
Yeah, give her some applause for that. Okay, so now the K-pop team, creative team, Jason, Keum, and yourself, you were Korean, right? Jason's Korean American, or
Yeah,
he's Korean
Korean
American. Yeah, he's a writer. He's a wonderful writer. And then the rest of the creative team and the producing, and they were not Korean, correct?
Right.
Did it ever feel like there was a disconnect? And I'm going to frame it this way. When I was doing Flower Drum Song, I was working with a very well-known director. He's a Tony, and I was doing Flower Drum Song, and he said, oh great, we're all going to take a field trip, and we're going to go to Grant Avenue. And we were all like, okay. I mean, it was San Francisco. We were like, okay. So we all got up, and we were walking down Grant Avenue with him, which is a song in the show. And he said, Erin, guess what? And I said, the fortune cookie factory. I know. And he was like, you mean you've been here before? And I was like, I'm Chinese. In San Francisco. I've been to Grant Avenue. And he was so disappointed. He was like, aw, I really wanted this to be a bonding thing. And I was like, it is, but I've been here before. And just that disconnect, it's funny, but it's like, what is happening? Why wouldn't you assume that I would know a little bit about the Chinese in San Francisco, given the fact that my background is largely Chinese? Largely, it's a lot. It's a lot of different things. It's all the Asians, it's all the letters, all the AAPI, I got all of them. But majority is Chinese, and I'm like, that was not a surprise to me. Grant Avenue is not a surprise to me. I've seen this movie on television since I was a small child. Were there moments like that for you all? And if you could talk about them. And you don't have to rip the Band-Aid off if it's painful. You can just, you can be lighthearted about it if it's hard. Or you can be vicious about it. It's fine. I'm good either way.
It's all love, man. Look, I think, of course. But, I think that my focus was that, like, of course, you know, when you're seeing people 8 shows a week and you're seeing them 6 days a week, anything is frustrating at that point. I mean, someone says hi and I'm like, ah, you know, so really, so definitely, absolutely. But I do, to answer your question, Erin, I do think that there were moments of disconnect, but I think that, you know, this is a symptom of the fact that, you know, even for us on this stage, it was a battle to become a storyteller. Because there aren't many people like us that came before us, right? Because it wasn't readily encouraged, whether it was because of our parents' fear of racism or the multitude of other reasons that exist, right? And so I think that until there are not only more actors or more composers, but more producers,
Yes.
more directors of color that are of Asian descent, that are being uplifted by our community and by the people that serve as their family home base. You know, this is something that, you know, is going to happen. And, you know, and when it does happen, I know everyone kind of reacts differently, but for me, I try to have grace in the fact that, like, you know, these people who are disconnected from me, and this may not be their story, but they believe in it, and they're curious about it. And I think if they have a teachability and a genuine curiosity that is fueled by an openness as opposed to a fear of being wrong, then that's something that I'm willing to look at and be like, yeah, that's how you pronounce it. Or like, yeah, you know, I love Korean barbecue too, you know? So definitely that existed, but I think that the thing that I took away more was the fact that I looked around a room, and for the first time in my 10-year career in like television and film, I looked at a room of people that looked like me. And like there was such a short head between us. And so again, walking before running, right? Yeah. I think this is an important step that our community is taking, and I'm really, really proud of how we took that, so yeah.
It's really hard to learn another culture without actually living it. You know, and you know, when I think of trying to assimilate to the American culture, it was because I was in survival mode. I had to fit in to survive here. I had to learn the language, and so, you know, I observe everyone else. I try to, you know, gather my courage to say one word, and, you know, maybe a joke, like throw a joke one time and see how that works. You know, you're like there completely immersed in it, and you, that's like, you're so desperate, right? You're so desperate to fit in and learn it and become a part of it. And working with non-Koreans on this show, that's something that I kept on pushing for. You know, it's not that I'm asking everyone to know fully what the culture is, but, you know, it's just not something that you can just learn by just searching on Wikipedia, or, you know, just like Google searching and reading an article. You need to be, if you're going to tell the story on behalf of Koreans, like if you're going to tell a Korean story, you need to be constantly curious and assume that you don't know enough. And you need to constantly, you know, you need to constantly feel this urgency and this sort of like this crisis of like, if I don't know enough, I shouldn't be telling it. You know, I think that mindset, like Eddy has always shown. I'm not saying that he was always. He was never stressed out. Like he was never like complaining. But he was always like curious, always asking questions, and always just, you know, asking the question of how do I respect this culture? How do I do better? Like it, and I think that is just that's just what's required if you're going to do a culturally specific show. And I think our team really tried to either, you know, a lot of our designers collaborated with the Korean artists, you know, so that they can ask questions constantly. And a lot of our non-Korean people in our creatives and cast were, you know, did their best. But, you know, whether intentional or not, there's always going to be this desire of a person who's had lived this experience, being able to tell the story, giving the agency to that person, for the directors, writers. It doesn't just end on stage. It really extends behind stage, and so, yeah, if through experience on K-pop, I definitely learned the importance of representation on and off the stage.
On and off the stage. Who's been writing about that for 11 years? Oh, me. just me. Okay.
Thank you for doing that.
Anybody? Didn't work for 3 years when I started writing, because everybody was like, what? The Asians aren't happy? Who cares? And then it became this huge tidal wave of oh, they're really angry. And that is honestly because we don't want to just be window dressing, and we don't want to have our faces just borrowed when you need a more exotic background or a more exotic moment in your show. It's actually important to have representation. And I started writing because my son, he was born, and my husband said, you're not going to be acting. And I was like, how do you know? And he said, well, not for a while anyway. So I started writing, and I remember breastfeeding and then not being able to go to sleep at 3 a.m. and then writing the first piece that went viral, which was what was it called? Moises Kaufman Can Kiss My Ass, and Here's Why. That had 25,000 reads in a day and a half. And I did not realize until that moment how deep the anger and the frustration was. And I want to be clear that anger is helpful sometimes. Anger is cleansing sometimes. And so this panel, I wanted to do it because I felt, just even as a casual observer, I felt angry that your run was cut short. I did feel angry. I was like, I looked at other shows that had gotten much worse reviews that were still running for months and months and months. I'm not gonna say months and months and months, and yet yours was like, right? So, anybody want to comment on that?
I mean, nowadays, I think Broadway itself is kind of in crisis. I think a lot of shows are relying on big names, whether it's a well-known property, like it's a well-known story that was on film that they're trying to bring to stage, or a big name composer, a big name artist that they're basing their songs off of, like jukebox musicals. Producers are relying on a lot of these properties that are well known because audiences are just coming back from the pandemic and they want a guarantee for a good time. And I think just to reduce this to something like racism, I think also is not fair.
That's true.
I think it's like, for me, I think it was actually a miracle that our show did exist on Broadway, and I'm really grateful that we did. It was in terms of time, it was very tough. Like it was we were still very deep in the COVID pandemic. A lot of our cast and audience members were, struggling with COVID, and for them to come out and see a show that's completely original and with no big names, and very different and new. I'm just really grateful for the audience that came out and supported and really enjoyed the show with us. And it is definitely sad, but I think there were just so many pieces that had to go together, and a lot of it is just the things that just are beyond anyone's control.
And let me make something very clear. I think we all on this stage have gone through this process of since the show has ended, of healing and
right.
Picking the weeds from the flowers, but I was fucking pissed. Let's make something very clear.
I was pissed along with you.
Helen saw the fury of God walking throughout the bazaar, overturning tables in my eyes. I was very pissed, and there is still a part of me that's very, very angry. I'm not going to sit here and lie. I think that You know, like Helen said, you know, there are so many reasons and variables at play, right? The pandemic was happening.
Right.
After the pandemic, the way that we spent money and what we wanted to see, we wanted comfort blankets as opposed to things that we had to take a chance on, right? Because
Right.
Broadway is not cheap. There's also marketing, right? Marketing that's typically tailored towards a certain group that our show does not necessarily reflect. And I also want to bring up another show, Ain't No Mo, was totally original. Shout out to Ain't No Mo, shout out to Jordan E. Cooper. What's up? But two wholly original pieces that closed within a week or so of each other, right? What is the common underlying factor, right? They were a New York Times Critics' Choice pick. You know, does Broadway know how to market towards people that look like us on this stage, or the people that look like them on their stage, right? Does that come into factor when it comes into, you know, like the amount of money that we're able to get from people that are willing to take a chance, right? And so all of those variables come into play, and you do really start to feel and start to internalize the fact that, like, wow, you really don't want me to be here. My story, the reason why that story felt so important to me, like my Storia, is because it wasn't because of...
Thank you for saying Storia.
No,
I was like, I've been trying to correct it. I'm like, Storia.
It's amazing. But it was because of the people in the audience that came and supported and came out in droves our final week and was dancing and singing with us outside of our theater. It was that made me feel like I was welcome on Broadway, right? And made me feel like a boy from Queens was able to be on Broadway. And I never thought that would happen, right? So at the end of the day, I think we were trying to uninternalize everything from all of that. But that's what I said when I gave that speech that final week, was like, go support BIPOC artists and BIPOC stories. Don't just talk about change or make a hashtag, because that is not a revolution. A hashtag is not a revolution. Be about it, talk about it, make noise. There is righteous anger and there is an importance for it at that table until you are a part of that table, right? We can't just have the same tired conversation in the cyclical nature time and time again every time a show by BIPOC people closes early, and you're wondering why some of these shows with these... But everyone's trying their best. But you're wondering why some of these shows are still there despite worse reviews or worse numbers, and you're just like, what is going on? And so I'm not using the race card. It is, I just call things the way that I see it, right?
Absolutely.
And there's something systemically broken in this business, and we're seeing it reflected. We're seeing it reflected in this business, and so, good luck.
Something that I definitely did learn from this experience was that I had a very idealistic view of my reality, which is if I just put in everything I've got into the work itself, that belief that the work will speak for itself. And Jordan E. Cooper actually said the same exact thing in his interview, and I was like, yes. Throughout the whole preview process, I was just like trying to make the work in the best shape possible, and I did not think of like marketing or like posting or anything. Like I was just like trying to like get the thing done. And but then the very final week after we were told that we have to close, I was like, oh, I need to do something too. So I started, I wrote an essay. I needed to put myself out there because the work itself is just not going to be even heard. Like I had to do more, and that is my reality, and that is probably not the reality for other white creatives. But for me, I realized that is kind of a different reality.
Yeah, that is a different reality, and it is worth a conversation to say, yes, Broadway is a primarily white institution, and yet everyone says they're inclusive and welcoming, and yet when they have opportunity to be inclusive and welcoming, the door is only, like we can get maybe an ankle in, right? Maybe a shoulder, and then it is very clearly shut. And we're all sitting here going like, well, maybe it was ticket sales, maybe it was, when the underlying truth is, in this country, we do have a problem with getting along with everybody, people who don't look like you, people who don't act like you, people whose experience is an immigrant experience. We always default to, oh no, the United States is welcoming, and Broadway is a microcosm, absolutely. And it's a liberal microcosm, by the way. So then the examination then becomes, well, if this is a liberal microcosm set in the city of New York, where is the support? Did you buy a ticket? Because I bought 2. And I brought friends each time because I said it was important. And I didn't bring Asian friends. Oh, I did bring Lainey. But I was like, wait, oh yeah. But I brought my friend Jeffrey Epstein. Not that Jeffrey Epstein. No, he's lovely. He used to work for Disney. But the reason I brought him is because he has a great love of Broadway musicals and he has a great love of everything new. And it didn't matter. He came out like singing and dancing, and we had literally the most annoying people behind us who were like cheering and everything we could barely hear, but he loved it. And he was like, that was so great.
What was really heartbreaking about closing was like, we were there every single performance and the audience were always transformed by the end. Like all of the audience were just like having a blast by the end of the show, and we experienced it every single time. And so that there was that distance of the audience reaction and the financial reality.
I was sitting in the same row the last show with Jose Lanya and Lainey Sakakura and like all these like the grandparents. Like we're all the grandparents now, right? We're all like all those aunties. We're like, I'm the auntie. And we're all okay with that because we've lasted long enough to be aunties and uncles. But I saw this very specific look on Jose's face. And Jose did in the same theater, he did Spelling Bee. And he was Chip Tolentino, which was not like specifically an Asian role, but he played it. And Lainey said, look at Jose, he looks so thoughtful. By the way, he's starring in Here Lies Love, which you can buy a ticket for. And he said, she said, what do you think Jose's looking at? And I said, he's looking around and he's thinking, that's where I came in every day, and that's where my dressing room is, and that's my exit over there. And he's putting his history on this show. And she was like, wow. So then, you know, it's intermission, he comes over to say hi, and I was like, hey, what were you thinking about? He goes, I was thinking about that's where I stood every day. And I was like, you see, Lainey? I said, you see, this theater has history, it has Asian American history. And now, even though it's closing and it's sad, it will have all their DNA, all their work, all their love, it seeps into the building. So it doesn't end, like it's always a cycle, right? And we're on the precipice of something that's really amazing. Are you okay? I know, we're all crying. But it is so bittersweet that this didn't have more of a chance because possibly marketing, possibly ticket sales, possibly coming back from a pandemic, possibly a language issue. So let's focus now on like some joy. Let's
Here Lies Love.
Yeah.
Shout out to my Filipinos.
Okay, so what are some of the best things that you take away from being in K-pop the musical? And I think honestly they far outweigh any of the negatives or a short run, because we have a brilliant cast album that you can go and buy. Please go buy it, please go download it, please support other Asian American Pacific Islander artists. What is the thing that you take away when you think of it?
I've been in productions that I feel like as Asian people we're either like the token Asian or we're like among a bunch of Asians, and I've had the privilege of doing both. And even I was on the King and I tour, and that was amazing. It was like seeing all these people who have forged paths ahead of me so that I can walk on those paths, and getting to work with them hand in hand was amazing. But then to come to K-pop, it was suddenly, like when I was in other productions, some Asian older people, like, it's crazy how much we've grown as a group, and it was a realization for me when someone older asked what a microaggression was. And so to have those conversations was amazing, but to come to K-pop and have a similar generational group of Asian people be able to talk so passionately about very complicated issues amongst each other, Like when Abraham spoke up immediately, when John Yee spoke up immediately, like all of these conversations I used to have to do on my own, like, and it felt so lonely. And that is one of the greatest things that I've taken away from K-pop, was that all of these people have experienced the same exact things that I have, and that we were able to create this space for each other, a safe space that was so constructive, was amazing.
Eddy or Amy?
Yeah, I think on a personal level, the family of K-pop and the relationships, I don't think I've ever been in a cast like this, where I think we all quite literally poured our blood, sweat, and tears and emotional everything into this show, and I mean that for every single person. So there's just a different kind of trust. Even when we just run into each other, we don't have to say anything, it's just like, hi. We just get it. But I think on a bigger scale, I mean, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, but what I see is the redemptive edge, and probably what also in some ways caused so much dissonance in those last few weeks, as Helen kind of touched on. Yes, we were seeing these reviews, yes, we were getting the bad news, but then coming out and seeing a crowd of people after the show, and even having John, one of our stage crew, he even said, he's like, I have never seen what's the thing called? I've never seen stage doors like this. And it just makes me think, so many of us are here because of Lea Salonga, the one person, or whoever it is, the few we've had to look towards, and to walk out and see children, Asian children, and not even just children, but I have such a specific memory of this woman who I'm assuming is maybe in her 40s, 50s. She came up, tears rolling down her face to me and Kate, and was like, I just wanted to say, I came here alone from California because I have been waiting so long for a show like this. And yeah.
There you go.
And just to know that there are people who came long before us, and people who are waiting to just see themselves reflected on a stage, that even if it was just one person or 50 people or however many people, that that's where I see the hope in our show, regardless of the numbers and what the headlines say. We saw people and got to hear those stories every night.
Eddy?
Absolutely. I think it's what makes it so sad for me is the potential and the heart and the spark that was undeniably there from us experiencing it and audiences seeing it. And thinking about that makes me so sad, but knowing that we got to affect so many people still. It's a short run, but we still got to we got to affect people in a lot of different demographics, because it wasn't just Asians, it was also
No, it wasn't.
it was
K-pop is not just for Asians. The demographic of the K-pop audience is international and global.
yeah.
It has extensive reach. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry. I remember being at the Hollywood Bowl 15 years ago, seeing Psy for the first time, and that was before Gangnam Style. I knew way before, and it was and I remember the energy when he came out, and I was like, that guy's a star. I was like, I don't know who, I'm gonna see him again, and now we can't get rid of him. So, the thing is that this show affected change just by being. You are all catalysts. A catalyst is something that affects change, remains slightly unchanged itself, and I only say you're catalyst because you made change happen, but you remain the wonderful people that you are, the wonderful creatives that you are. Helen, is there anything you want to say about joy?
Yeah, I see the culmination of this show in my own daughter. She's 8 years old, and I asked her, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she's like, maybe a Broadway composer, or actually actor. I want to be an actress, in Broadway shows like K-pop. And that neither of those were things that anybody that I knew that were Asian used to say when we were growing up. Like,
Right.
because there was never a broad, like Asian, women composers on Broadway, and there were,
You're looking at the first.
They were
This
not
is the first.
They were not, it wasn't obvious that, that an Asian could just like dream of like a Broadway actor, like there were just a lot of like these very stereotypical roles, and so just seeing that in the young, young children, we've accomplished a huge thing, and we definitely made history.
Yes, and I think that's where we're going to wrap it up. This is K-pop. That was their storia, but their story is not over. I want you to go to social media. I want you to follow all these people. I know that Helen is actively writing, and of course, as usual on our panels, we can't talk about what she's writing next. But she has many projects coming up, and all of these actors and dancers and performers have things coming up. So the best way that you at home can affect change is follow these people. Give them your love on social media. Give them the boost that, because now when people are casting, well, back when we used to be casting, when we weren't on strike, which hopefully will end sometime. Go out and support. The way now that studios and television shows and everything do look at the actors is, what are their numbers on social media? So if you want to see more Asian American Pacific Islanders on television shows, on Broadway, in films, all of which are happening, but still slowly, then go follow them and really give them their props. Even if it's just a video where they're like dancing for 30 seconds, just to leave a comment, I love it, and then make sure you forward their video to 2 friends, and that's how we do it. It is a grassroots movement. It isn't happening overnight, very sadly, but what it is happening, and that's the important part. Show business has changed so much since I started back in the ancient dinosaur age. It's just Asian, it doesn't reflect my actual age. So the business is so different. New shows are happening, creative shows are happening. All these people on stage, I want to give a huge applause and thank you to. They came out here to rip the Band-Aid off for all of you and give us a little peek behind the curtain, and I'm really grateful that all of you showed up. Thank you so much. Thank you.